Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Heroes Mindset Podcast. Today I have on with me Rahul Rana. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
So Rahul Rana is the author of a book that's coming out this week called Making Moonshots, coming out December 7th. So I'd love to hear more about it and love to hear more about what you do.
Yeah, of course. So making moonshots, it's a deep dive into the philosophies, mindsets, and strategies that are conducive to building moonshot companies, right? So what's a moonshot company? It's really anything that, takes some really advanced sort of science and technology, solves a really big problem in the world, and they do so with this radically creative solution, right? So there's three parts of the spectrum. And, basically it's just, a sort of a discussion on, how to be like, Elon Musk, right? Sam Altman, Laura Deming, all these names that we hear in the tech industry, but taking that mindset and just making it actionable, right? How any everyday person can sort of harness it and sort of, I demystify a lot of the myths around these, really bold, really seemingly impossible companies and how really anyone can get started on their journey. So yeah. And I guess outside of the book, I'm currently an intern at Lux Capital. It's a, venture firm that invests in moonshot companies, right? Deep tech startups. So that's really cool. And yeah, I've been there a couple months and currently a sophomore at Rutgers studying finance and astronomy.
So it is really cool. You are a 19-year-old student who has just written a book, and you have been able to interview all these incredible people, and in a way you have started what a moonshot yourself. A moonshot as in maybe not some crazy company, but you've taken an idea, you've taken a big step and was able to run with it. So I gotta ask, a lot of the listeners that I have on this podcast are so they have big mindsets. They really want to go and make a change, high school, college kids. The question is, what is the reason why so many kids are full of potential, full of skills, full of knowledge, but just don't take action?
It's pretty simple. It's the easier thing to do. You know what I mean? Making moonshots, right? Doing these hard things, it's not easy whatsoever. It's you have to sacrifice your a lot of aspects of your life, right? Sort of, take away some luxuries that you have. It's tough, right? And it's risky at the end of the day. So you're probably not even going to succeed nonetheless. So it's it makes sense why people don't want to, right? They're probably comfortable in their however they live, right? Their current lifestyles. They don't really need to make some major change. And even if they have the energy to do so, it's do they have the, they may have the energy, but do they have that sort of that initiating sort of motivation to do so? That sort of that need to do so, that their life depends on it, or that, their life's purpose or life's mission depends on it. So it's interesting because, a lot of people I know, and one of the reasons I wrote the book is all right, I know everyone has the energy. It's just that they're misguided, right? No one knows where to put it. No one knows where to channel it, right? That's one of the aspects of my book that I address, right? A lot of people, we want to do some positive things in the world, right? Everyone has that energy to do so, but it's just where you channel it, how you channel it, all that stuff. That's basically what I try to get at. And, it's interesting. It seems to be it's some sort of, complex level of genius, but it really isn't. Honestly, anyone can do it. I'm a 19-year-old, Rutgers kid. I'm no genius. And yet, I realized that, having those right qualities, right? Philosophies, whatever, strategies, whatever it may be, right? It's so accessible to anyone. So yeah.
So it's really funny. You take such a realistic approach of it. It's doing this stuff is hard, man. Being an entrepreneur, taking a risk, everyone wants to be like Elon Musk. Let's be real. Everyone wants to be Elon Musk. But at the same time, it's nobody has the guts to be Elon Musk. Only Elon Musk and a few other people have the guts to be Elon Musk. And it's really interesting how you say that there is so many risks that come with it, that most people aren't going to end up being like Elon Musk. And, I guess, the big question left is okay, so what can somebody do to take action and be besides reading your book, of course, what can I do to just be you know what, I'm going to go and take some big action, the thing I've been waiting on, the thing that, I've really been pushing off.
Yeah, of course. So get started, right? Get started on Moonshot company, whatever you want to call it. And sort of, Moonshot's just a metaphor for just seemingly impossible things, right? Really hard things, right? So
yeah.
My book is all in context of startups. So to get started on a moonshot company, it's a lot of things, right? The whole premise of my book, right? I sort of break it down into, what's the mindset like, right? What's the philosophies that you need, that sort of like, the best entrepreneurs use, right? What strategies, and how do you take advantage of the ecosystem, right? So to get started, it's a lot of things, right? All right. So first, right, you got to realize, like, all right, anyone can do this. What is sort of your personal competitive advantage in doing so, right? Like, what is that impact you want to make? But why are you the only person in the world that can make it, right? If you don't have that, I would recommend, all right, try to find that out, right? Build the skills, be extremely, extremely resourceful. I know people who at age 12, they cold emailed a professor at a university, ended up working for them, and now, like, 10, 15 years later or so, like, they're doing insane things. Like, they're literally, like, this person I'm thinking of, there's like extending people's lives literally, and they're working in longevity, right? I know another person, I think age 14, 15 or so, did the same thing, right? Cold emailed a professor or whatever, when you, again, 14 years old or whatever, and he was working at a research lab, and then he went on to make, billions of dollars. It's just insane. There's so many examples out there, just like resourceful, right? Maximizing serendipity, right? Doing everything you can do, like, you could do, even if people say, it's impossible, right? Even if you're not even supposed to do it, just doing it. And getting started on the process, that's one of the hardest things to do. So you just gotta be incredibly resourceful. It's really intuitive, but like many people just like miss that, right?
It's
So
funny because
once you get that foundation, right? Yeah, continue.
no, it's interesting because most people don't do that, right? Like most people, like I had a
No, yeah,
friend that emailed the Northwestern professor, an entrepreneurship professor, and essentially was his mentee for like 2 years. And it's like, why didn't I think of that? Or at the same time,
yeah,
what was holding me back from doing that? And I think so many people sort of wait to believe that they're going to be, that their time is going to come. But at the same time, you think of somebody 12, 14 years old going and doing big things. It's like we could really, Warren Buffett started investing when he was 13, and his one regret was that he didn't start sooner. And
yeah.
that's the big thing. It's like, get started. That's the first one.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like I'm not saying like, all right, you should pressure kids to like go start early. Like, that's horrible. Like, I'm not saying, don't like, like abuse your kids into like, becoming researchers at age 14. Like, that's stupid. That's counterintuitive. What I'm saying is just like, whoever wants to get started, right? Like whoever wants to, make their moonshot or do whatever they want with it, they just got to be incredibly resourceful, right? I'm an outsider in the tech world. Like, I by no means had to have any background. I'm a finance major. Like, by all means, like, no skills, no network. Like, I'm in New Jersey. Like, it's the furthest thing from Silicon Valley, and yet I made my way in, right? A bunch of cold emails, right? A lot of just like jumping on Zoom calls or whatever it may be. A lot of when we did have in-person events, I did meet people. Again, maximizing serendipity is so key to just like all success, right? Especially if you're an outsider, trying to get into, startups or whatever you want to get into. You just got to, whatever it means to maximize serendipity in the context of whatever you're trying to solve, like, that's the key to everything. So yeah.
Explain what you mean by that. Maximizing serendipity.
Yeah, it's just making luck come to you, right? Like, positioning your life and positioning yourself in a way that luck will just come to you, right? Again, I'll give you the example, right? Cold emails, right? It's one thing that all college kids dread, and yet, the people who are successful, that's literally what they say every single time, right? Cold emails. And
Yeah.
again, cold emails is just a numbers game, right? You send more cold emails out, right? Like, really personalized, really concise emails to all the people you want to speak to, actually add value to their life. Chances are you're going to, get some attention in return, right? They're going to probably answer your email, maybe jump on a call and so forth. Or you could build, it's the start of a relationship, right? Like, a perfect analogy to like, sort of maximizing serendipity, right? Like, if you're in a thunderstorm and you want to capture lightning, like, you're going to have a better shot at capturing lightning if you put up a, lightning rod during a thunderstorm, right? If you just like sit outside, like, on the ground on a sunny day, you're probably not, lightning's probably not going to strike, right? It's basically that notion, right? Like, just do everything you can for luck to hit you, right? For lightning to hit you, and so forth. And at the end of the day, like, something will hit if you stay persistent. So that's what sort of like, maximizing serendipity is to me.
I often think about that, the fact that, we often believe in these things known as like fate and destiny and all these
Yeah.
things. But at the same time, you usually think of that as like, you believe that you're gonna meet some beautiful woman or handsome man, whatever, right? And you're gonna meet them and fall in love, and that's how it's gonna be. But at the same time, you're missing one part of the picture. It's like, first of all, you got to be at the bar, and second of all, you got to have the guts to go up and speak to them, right?
No,
and
real,
and
yeah.
those things are the serendipity that sort of come along, and And if if we just lived in a cave our whole lives, or if we decided to waste most of our time, then at the same time we're just not going to end up maximizing the potential or the opportunities that we possibly could get.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
It's scary. It does scare me. So I do need to ask, and you are very exceptional at this, right? Like, we have a I'll be on a FaceTime call with you, and by the way, Rahul is one of my close friends, so I'll be on a call with Rahul, and literally he'll be saying, I just emailed, 20 people today, and I only got back 5 responses, but those 5 responses were good people, and I got to jump on a call with them, and all these things. How could somebody actually develop, a habit of actually getting and like beginning these conversations with these people, and also overcoming the barriers of sending that first email or sending the first 5 emails or anything like that?
Yeah, of course. So the first thing is just getting over the fear that they care about you, right? And it's dark to say that. I know it sounds weird, but like they don't care about you. So it doesn't matter like what they think of you, right? Like you're never gonna see them. So again, if they ignore your email, like whatever it is, like if it just like doesn't go the way you want it to be, it doesn't matter. You just like move on, right? Your life will not be, affected by that. Like it's all good, right? So you just gotta get over the fear of, cold email, right? Approaching people sort of, a lot of people I meet, they're just like, damn, like, how do you have the guts to, email one of these, managing directors, or whatever, right? Like, billionaires or whatever, like whatever, whoever it may be. It's just like, all right, like, I mean, like, if I could add value to them in some way, why would they not sort of, reply with at least one line or something, right? Like, and like actually like adding some sort of tangible value, like, you know what I mean? So, look, you gotta realize, like, all right, like it's not really that scary to do. So you gotta get over that fear, right? You gotta, again, you have to add some value to their life, right? In my in my sort of, experience, everyone wants to be in a book. So I just hit them up and be like, hey, like, can I speak to you for like, 15 minutes? Put you in my book, be kind of cool, right? You'll be on the back cover or whatever it may be. And they're all like, damn, like, all right, like I'm obviously I want, like it's like I guess like it's an ego thing at that part, but nonetheless, everyone just wants to be helpful, right? They want to see, sort of up and coming talent, and they want to see people win at the end of the day, right? So just give them the opportunity to help them help you, right? So that's one thing, right? Just sort of that sort of mindset going into it, and then in the actual cold email, right? Like honestly, it's just all about being hyper personalized, yet also really really concise, and just really personable, right? No one wants to everyone's busy and doing whatever work they have to do in the middle of the workday. Like they want to break, right? They want to make friends, like they want to meet new people, they want to meet cool people. Just be that person, right? Be that person who people want to meet, and so for have like a solid conversation, sort of like an intro email and whatever it may be, throw in their words and their phrases that they really love using, or whatever the ideas they like talking about, and your thoughts on it, just like somehow, right? Make it super personalized, really concise, and you're probably gonna get a return email.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There was one of our mutual friends. His name's Zach, and his uncle is actually the GM of the Eagles right now, and highly respected. He's like the king of Philadelphia right now. So you got to ask yourself, what was the way that Howie Roseman was able to become the GM of the Eagles? And I asked him, and he actually said he sent about 1,000 personal letters to 32 different football teams, all 32 NFL teams, and after a total of about 1,000 letters, he finally got a call back, or a letter back, from the Eagles, who gave him a lowly position as a research analyst, and he ended up working his way up. And we must ask ourselves the question of how many other people sent 1,000 letters, right? How many other people gave up after the second letter, or how many other people didn't even get the idea to even try?
No, exactly. Yeah, like there's just like one saying I heard. It's just like you're one cold email away from success, right? Like you're one cold email away from your dreams. And it's just like damn, like what's stopping you, right? Like if you're really passionate about something, just do it, right? Just like again, like it's sort of like you're so close. Like everyone is always like so close with what they want to do. It's just it's just a matter of like persistence, right? It's just a matter of again maximizing serendipity, right? Letting luck come to you. If you want to get in contact with someone because you want to work somewhere, right? Like again, letting luck come to you, right? You gotta get on the radar, right? You gotta get their attention somehow. How else are you gonna do that without a cold email, right? So it's just like, all right, like just like again, like the universe is like, I know like a lot of people, sort of like, have paranoia, right? Basically the universe is sort of, working against them. I honestly think it's like pronoia, right? Like the universe is like conspiring to help you out. You just gotta let it, right? It's not the way of thinking. I know a lot of people aren't, don't have the right, sort of circumstances to be optimistic. Like obviously everyone is different, but nonetheless, like I just feel like take advantage of that pronoia, right? The universe wants to help you, right? Just like let luck come to you, and everything else will come in return. So yeah.
There's also this idea that really, really gets to me, and it's true psychologically, which is scary, right? Like there have been
Yeah.
research studies which prove it, and it's an idea that goes back to the Bible, where it was in the Gospel of Matthew, where he says, "May the rich get richer and the poor get poorer," and we think about that, and that is the least fair way of thinking, ever, ever. But
Yeah.
when we really think about it, we could think about it in terms of a financial way, but this is the Bible. He doesn't really they're not talking about this in a financial way. They're talking about this in a spiritual way. They're talking about this in a passion way, and they're talking about this in a universal way. So when you think about it, the rich in this case are the people who decide to really go and make a big decision, and they're going to get richer because they're going to get new opportunities. They're going to get new ways of thinking, right? And they're going to learn from this experience. But for the people who are poor, and as in poor, I mean the people who don't hit up people, who don't go and take any action towards their goals, they get less of the opportunities. They lose their potential. They lose their ability to go and do things because time is a ticking clock. Eventually they're going to hit the point of 24 and they're going to have to go and get a job. And they're going to lose out on their dreams. And the poor end up getting poorer. And it really does scare me. And the fact that most people say, I'm going to take action later. I'm going to take action later. But in reality, they're just getting, in our words, poorer.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and you make a good point. Like, it's by no means financial. Like, you mean it just, yeah. I 100% agree. Like if you don't get started, like it's like, all right, like it's your loss, right? Like it's no one else's loss but yours. So it's just like, all right, like that's what like lights a fire in me. Like, all right, like I don't want to lose. I want to be like mentally wealthy, right? Mental wealth and everything. Like everyone talks about that. Like you just gotta get started, and it really is a key to just like all sorts of success and whatnot. Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. When you think about mental wealth, we think about. I like to talk about this in sort of like contemporary terms. Spending 1 hour learning or reading a book or whatever, right? Like some sort of educational piece versus spending 1 hour on TikTok. Like when you think about that, or spending 1 hour just doing some sort of time wasting activity. Actually, I'm reading about a philosopher right now called Seneca, and in his works he says that we say that life is short, but at the same time most of us waste most of our days. Often our days just wasted.
Yeah.
It's scary. It really is. And and at the same time that means you're slowly dying, right? That means you're getting poorer in this sense. And you think about it, and 1 hour of growing your information, growing your knowledge, growing yourself, that could make a world of a difference if you end up compounding that. But at the same time, if you spend 1 hour on TikTok, if you spend 1 hour on social media, 1 hour just doing something that's wasting your time, then you end up actually depleting your ability to do difficult things, and also you're depleting your motivation to do the actual important things. So it really does stand true in the fact that the rich do get rich and the poor get poor.
No, 100%. And I'd be a liar if I didn't admit like that, spending an hour on TikTok, I'm guilty of that every day. Like I'm always guilty of that. And I'm like, sometimes 2 hours, but like nonetheless, like, no, you're 100% right. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about before, right? Like sort of people who get started earlier, right? Or who just, take the initiative, right? Maximize starting to be, whatever you want to call it, right? They take advantage of compounding. And that's like key, right? Like that's like compounding itself, right? It's, it can mean so many things basically, right? Just like doing something, whatever it is, like a little bit every day, like in the long run, it'll be huge, right? And it'll just like absolutely explode, right? Just like taking advantage of sort of exponential growth and whatnot. And like, I see it everywhere. Oh my God, there's so much, so many. You see it in like, see it in startups, right? You see it in like sort of personal growth. I don't know, you see it in like knowledge, right? Becoming like if you want to say, if you want to be considered an expert, like again, those people who, and I actually talk about this in my book, right? Like again, moonshots are for everyone. Anyone can do it regardless of, sort of financial well-being or whatever it may be. And that's another thing I want to bring up nonetheless, but like, right, like anyone can do it, right? It's just that, they need that, that initiation, that like initiating energy, right? Like that foundational, right? Just like that most basic sort of motivation to like, do whatever they want, right? Pursue whatever they want. But, they got to just remember, right? Like all the people who like really are successful, like they start small and they start it, regularly, right? They're not, they're not like bold from the start, right? They do it like, little chunks by little chunks, and just, those chunks just eventually, compound into something exponential, right? And like, obviously I'm talking like career trajectory and whatnot, but nonetheless, right? Like, if you want to be like an expert on something, right? Just start like, 10 minutes a day, like read something new about that field. Eventually, those 10 minutes will turn into 20 and 20 into 30. And then, if you do it like, weeks and months on end, like, you're going to learn so much, right? And again, it's just like taking advantage of that sort of compounding knowledge, or that compounding sort of intelligence, and everything will come out of it. And you'll be qualified enough to become, become an expert, or whatever you want to be. Just like if you want to, feel like you're ready to take on the moonshot or whatever it is, right? Like, that's how you get started.
And a big thing you're talking about right there is patience, right? Being able.
Oh my God,
yeah. Like it's so bad, and the fact that when I was younger, I used to do this thing where it would be, I used to do this like two times a month. Let's say, I'd say I need to start working out, so I'd start working out. I'd be like, all right, cool, let me do some push-ups right now. And now for the rest of my life, I'm going to work out an hour a day. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to make this drastic change in my life. And then you wake up the next day and it just doesn't work out. You don't get the motivation to do it. Your body doesn't let you do it. And it's because I was so impatient. I was looking for the results right away. I was saying, you know what? If I don't have, my brain was saying this. I wasn't saying this explicitly.
Yeah.
If I don't get jacked within a month, then I'm just, I'm just worthless, or, I'm just, I'm not going to be patient enough to get my way through it. I'd rather take the easy way out. So I got to ask, for moonshot companies and for companies in general, do you find that, obviously, we've talked about your book a lot, and you talk about the philosophy of moonshots, what is really going on inside the heads of moonshots. So do they have this sort of patient game, and what else is going on inside of their heads?
Yeah, no, like, and sort of, in the context of moonshots, right? It's all this, deep tech, right? Sort of, things that are maybe 10 to 15 years, in the future, and you're bringing it now, and it's, this is heroic sort of thing, right? Like, it's, it's like cutting edge, breakthrough, whatever synonym, right? Like, everyone gets the point, right? All these sort of advanced things, right? Like, it's inherently, on this, 10 to 15 year timeline, right? Because like, making these like, really bold companies, and, these like deep tech startups, like, you need to be patient, because at the end of the day, like, the technology needs to work, right? It needs to develop, right? Whatever it may be, like, all the R&D, like whatever it is, right? It's operating on this, long-term, this long-term view. And that's what I realized a lot of the most successful deep tech founders have, right? They have this long-term vision, long-term view of, the technology or science at hand. And also they have this wisdom in sort of, time and space, right? Basically, right? Like they, it is this long-term view, but not only is that, but they also have to consider sort of two things, right? Conventionally it's called, systems thinking and second order thinking, right? Whatever, the way I interpret those two as it, right? Systems thinking is wisdom in space. Second order thinking is wisdom in time, right? So, space and time. Whatever.
Wait, explain that a little bit more. Yeah, you got me a little lost.
So, all right. So, right. And they're operating in this long-term view, right? 5 to 15 years or whatever it may be, right? To make this company, right? Whether you're aiming for IPO and a merger acquisition, whatever it is, right? They're like, that's sort of like the end goal, whatever they want to be. To get started on that, right? Like when you're starting now, right? Like day 0, day 1, whatever it is. Obviously, like I mentioned before, right? The best founders, right? They're looking, right, like 15 years into the future. But not only are they doing that, right? They're not just like, trying to predict the future. Like what they're trying to do is like, mapping out a really tangible, really possible sort of way to do so, right? To get to that. Obviously, no one's like some sort of like, what's the, I don't know, clairvoyant. I don't know if that's the right term. But no one can like predict like the future, whatever it is.
Fortune teller, yeah.
Fortune teller, I don't know. Yeah, no, I mixed it up. Anyway, whatever. Right? Like no one can like forecast that. But like, it's just like having the wisdom and being ready for anything to happen, right? So, all right, so let me get into those two things, right? Wisdom in time, right? Second order thinking. Basically, it's this mental model that like, all right, based on your actions, right? What are the consequences of those actions? What are the consequences of those consequences? And, the consequences of this consequences of this consequence, right? Like third order, fourth order, fifth order, whatever it may be, right? What are all the possibilities that in terms of using this technology in this way, in this manner, in this context, whatever it is, right? What do you have to do to get to that sort of that 15 years in the future, or obviously it's relative, like it changes for whatever product, whatever technology, whatever company, but nonetheless, like, you know what I mean, right? So basically just knowing every possible thing that could happen, right? Preparing for it. My boss, right, Josh Wolf, he always says failure comes from a failure to imagine failure. Like, let that sink in. Like, that was like deep when I first heard that. Like, right, like failure comes from a failure to imagine failure, right? Like, if you don't imagine it, right, if you're not prepared for every single possibility, you're going to fail, right? And basically having that mindset, right, knowing all the second, third, fourth, fifth order sort of consequences and whatever may happen, like you got to have that wisdom, right? Like a perfect example, like, and it's by no means realistic, but it just encapsulates it really well. Like, back in like 2003, 2004, whatever, right? Like Mark Zuckerberg, like, all right, he definitely never, forecasted, all right, like Russia's going to use Facebook to hack American elections, right? Or Facebook is going to contribute to some mental health crisis or some privacy issue, right? He obviously never. What normal person would ever envision that, right? But that's the thing. That's what Moonshot founders have to do, and then the best ones, that's exactly what they do. And they, again, obviously, it's relative. They're maybe not going to think as extreme as Russia hacking the elections, but nonetheless, right? Like, they know every single thing that could happen, right? What's going to happen culturally if this product hits 1 million people, right? What happens if there's one bad actor that uses this product, or this technology, or whatever it is, right? All these hypotheticals, like, they're ready for that.
Yeah,
They're always ready for that, right? So that's what I mean, right? Wisdom and time, right?
Yeah.
You're saying something?
No, that's the thing. You're talking about radical changes here. Radical changes in maybe the structures of society, or even this applies to the radical changes within yourself. Every action has a reaction. Every action has a consequence. And and the whole thing is, if you're just what Mark Zuckerberg did, for example, right, or when you throw in autonomous cars, right, like that's a moonshot. What they did was they really re-envisioned the way that we should interact, and by adding a new way of thinking, a new knowledge, a new system, you're tearing apart the old system, and you're losing the stability from that old system. So I think it really is interesting. I also did love, failure comes from the failure to imagine failure. I love that. I was thinking about that a lot, actually. I'm looking at the movie The Lion King right now, and it's funny. It's so funny because we all know The Lion King, and you got to ask. It's like, all right, Mufasa was the perfect king. He was the perfect god, yet he was killed by his brother. It's like, how did that happen, right? Like, what did he do that was wrong? What was his fatal flaw? And his fatal flaw was that he tells Simba, he goes, look at our kingdom. Our kingdom is everything that the light touches. But at the same time, don't look over there. Don't look to that place over there. And that's where Scar lived, right? And Scar ended up killing him. And his problem was his ignorance. Like, we're often so uneducated, right? The failure comes from the inability for the failure to imagine failure is really saying often we are ignorant. Often we don't have enough knowledge and enough wary to really figure out what is going to go on. So, so it's really important. It's really awesome to see that, this idea of not being ignorant, of looking at every single possible option, is used in founders too. That's incredible.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, like, it's also like it's a discussion on like morals and ethics and stuff. Like, right, like in my book, like I make this sort of call to action that, like, not only do we need all these innovative breakthrough whatever fancy companies, right? We need wise companies, right? That's huge. We need we need companies that actually realize the consequences of their action, right? That the world operates in this complex system that, like, all if they're chasing profitability, like, all right, there's going to be some downfalls to that, right? There's going to be some downside, and they got to be aware of that. They got to mitigate that, right? Like, we can't live in this society where companies are destroying the environment, right? Or treating workers unfairly, like, whatever it is, right? Everyone knows all the common sort of complaints and problems that we have in the world. It's just like, we need companies that are wise, that actually consider all the consequences of those consequences, and so forth, right? In terms of politics and economics and technology and sociology and morals and ethics and philosophy, like everything, right? You gotta be ready for it all. And again, the best moonshot founders, like, I realized that they do that, and they evidence that in the work. It's really interesting. Yeah.
So what is the benefit? What is really the benefit of saying, I'm not going to care about profit, but in the end, it's going to bring me more profit, right? What really goes on there in a founder to be able to say, if for the long term, it's better not to focus on profit now?
It's interesting. I mean, like, it does come down to personal morals. Obviously, like, I'm no, like, I'm not like some like some like hard like capitalist or whatever. It's just like, profits at the expense of everything. Like, I'm not like that, obviously. So, me personally, like, I think like, all right, like we can't go down this level of sort of unchecked capitalism and whatever it is, right? Just like
Yeah.
let companies do whatever they want to. Like, that's just not good. That's a recipe for disaster, right? Basically, what I'm just saying is just like we need wise right, like I guess before, like we need wise companies that actually give a shit, right? Like they give a shit about things that are not in their purview, right? Maybe the effects of all their operations, but maybe it's not in their their sort of first or second degree sort of consequences of their actions and whatever it is, right? It's so simple. I mean, like it sucks when you see like companies that are, again, this is like the most simple example I can think of, right? Those that are polluting the environment, right?
Yeah.
Those that are contributing to some sort of crisis or whatever, or right, or accelerating some crisis or whatever it is, right? There's so many examples out there. It's just like we need to stop that, right? Like we need to take those people out. Like it is this sort of like new age of technology and science and business and whatever, but just like like everyone used to operate under sort of like Milton Friedman's like doctrine that like, all right, like the sole purpose of business is just make profits, right? Help stakeholders and stuff like that, or, not
Mhm.
stakeholders, shareholders and so forth, right? Not care about all the stakeholders, but only like people at the top or whatever, right? That's changing, right? Now we live in this world where not only does obviously profitability is huge, like you need to be profitable, but you also have to be ethical, right? You need to be moral, right? You got to consider all those things, and it's interesting, right? Like I forgot where I heard this, but just like in the last like 20 years or so, right? Those the companies that had like that engaged in a good amount of ECG work, right? Like environmental, social, whatever work, right? Who had like a good sense of corporate social responsibility, right? Like all those companies, those are the ones whose stocks boomed, right? And the ones who
Really?
didn't, those are the ones who failed. Yeah, there's like a whole thing. I think it was like who's the one guy that one politician who made the movie all about environmental something after tomorrow. I forgot. It's that one
Yeah,
politician
not
who
sure.
like really campaigns on. I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, he predicted, all right, like the best companies are those who have those those ECG initiatives, right? And he was right. So again, like we gotta get rid of that sort of like profits at at the expense of the environment or morality itself. We gotta get rid of that. And it's interesting, right? Like obviously it's interesting because like so many people, it's subjective, right? So many people
Yeah.
have their own sort of beliefs, right? Their own morals, their own ethics, whatever it is. So I don't know. We'll see. It's definitely a fun sort of
So that's a
thought
good
experiment. Yeah.
question. So yeah, so I mean, how could we? So I think everyone sort of agrees on a societal perspective that yeah, we should get rid of this slaving away for profit, you could say. But the hardest question is how. Like what is the way that somebody could really go in and say it will
Yeah.
actually be better for me individually to
Mhm.
to stop polluting the environment or to stop accelerating this change. What is the thing that really gets in the brains of the how?
Yeah, of course. How we get companies to do that? Startups, right? Start like the newcomers who sort of disrupt that space and get the old guard out, right? Like that again, that moonshots, right? They're doing like
Yeah.
sort of David and Goliath stories, right? Like the startups, like I'm that's why I love startups, right? Like they just like they just cause like so many problems for like the old guard and whatever. And yeah, I love a good underdog story. You know what I mean? Like it's on one hand, right? It's like the way to get sort of take those bad actors out of power and whatever, right? It's to simply introduce some sort of solution or some sort of company that takes them down, right, systemically, right? Like has that competitive advantages, right? Has all those moats, defensible moats, and whatever it is, right? And we can get into business terms and whatever, but nonetheless, right? Like it's just the people who like can overpower them in this this profitable and also ethically sound way.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's
again, it's all subjective, right? But nonetheless, like that's one way. And if you could prove that, there you go, right? Like
yeah.
everyone will be on your side. So I don't know, it's interesting. And like I'm saying, like I don't mean that in like absolute by any way. Like it's hard to talk in absolutes in regards to this. Like again,
Agreed.
people have different ideologies, right? Like I'm like you could like people could probably tell like I'm sort of like I'm like I'm as liberal as they get, right? You could probably tell through conversation, just like politics. That's a whole other thing, right? Everyone has different ideologies. Like it's not like all right, like people on the right maybe, or sort of hardcore capitalists that are probably gonna argue with everything I'm saying right now. So it's tough. Like you gotta change the social attitude, right? You gotta change the social infrastructure, right? Social incentives, like everything. And
Well,
that's a
that's why
whole
I
other
think.
conversation. Like
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just wonderful just looking in to see how amazing electronic vehicles are doing. Honestly, right? Like electronic vehicles are actually just taking, they're doing a better job than gas vehicles. And if you look at it, in a few years, there's just going to be more electronic vehicles than there are gas vehicles. And that's just
yeah,
because and nobody's going to be mad about that because they're eventually electronic vehicles are going to cost less than a gas vehicle. Like I think I want to buy a
yeah,
Tesla when I'm older, and I'm not going to buy a Tesla because it's more sexy or more stylish or whatever. I'm going to buy a Tesla because it is so much more cost efficient to buy a Tesla. Always,
yeah,
always. Because you look at a regular gas car, its value declines after about, let's say, 150,000 miles, 200,000 miles. But an electronic vehicle, a Tesla, can go like 500,000 miles without ever breaking down. And it's
yeah.
such a beautiful thing because these electronic vehicles are actually just taking over, and they're going to make the space of cars so much more environmentally friendly as well
Yeah.
as profitable.
No, yeah, no, you're so right, and that's like one misconception actually. I came across in my research, right? Whenever talking about moonshots, right? All these sort of societal positive impacts, whatever it is, right? Like everyone thinks, like maybe like sometimes it's called like impact investing, or sort of social sort of whatever, like social entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it, right? Like everyone thinks that those things are inherently unprofitable, right? They're charity work, whatever you want to call it, right? A lot of people sort of look down upon it, right? That it can't beat sort of traditional extremely optimized manners and whatever it may be, no matter what their sort of external sort of consequences are. But that's changing, right? There's so many companies out there, startups now, I would say, maybe not sort of well established corporations, but they're getting there, right? They're getting there. Like they're like the ones that are really disrupting, again, the incumbents, right? The old guard, but they're doing so in a way that's not it's not charity work, right? Like it's not like it's still profitable. Like it's still a sound business. It's an efficient business, right? And yet it also considers all the sort of second, third order whatever consequences, and it's actually wise, right? Like it actually cares about whatever it does to the world and whatnot. So it's interesting. Like once we already saw we're beginning to see, I would say, that marriage between profit and purpose. And I think it's just going to be huge, and it's going to be a lot more huger in the future. And I'm actually really excited. That's what I want to be investing in, right? Like that's what
Yeah.
I'm going to give all my attention to that. So yeah.
Well, that's what's so wonderful about it. Like hopefully, I think we all are just inherently optimistic in terms of
Yeah.
essentially everything, right? Like
Mhm.
I can imagine the people in the 1940s in America just saying, "I really hope that, America and Britain beat the Germans," right? Like
Yeah. Mhm.
everybody saying, "I hope that happens." But at the same time, there's a chance that we'd all be speaking German right now. Like it's true and it's scary,
It's
And I
scary.
think and I think everybody's saying right now, it's the same example of everybody saying, I really hope that we're going to fix this environmental crisis. I really hope that we
Yeah.
do. But there's this little inherent optimism that's inside of
Mhm.
me that I'm just like, we'll figure it out. We'll do it. It'll happen some way. And I think, that's the wonderful thing. It's going to happen through startups. It's going to happen through some new invention, new idea, yeah, we'll go with new idea that just absolutely just disrupts the market and changes the way that we think about things.
For real, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, you bring up a good point, right? Optimism, right? That's so huge. And I think about optimism in sort of two ways, right? Just in the context of, right, deep tech, right? Every deep tech founder, they're incredibly optimistic, right? Like they I know one person, I always say this, right? The boldest company, and my friend Justin, if he hears this, he knows I'm talking about him, right? Like the boldest company that I've ever heard of was my one friend Justin. Like he's trying to build 3D printing factories on the moon. Like he wants to bring the infrastructure up to the moon, and the infrastructure will make a factory out of itself, right? Again, 3D printing, and then it'll make
Yeah.
it'll be this factory where it could like just like self-produce sort of all the things that happen on the moon, right? All the buildings, infrastructure, whatever, right? It's crazy. It's bold like that. That's the boldest thing I've ever heard of. But again, it's just people like that. Those are the people who are changing the world, right? the really, really optimistic people, you know, these sort of techno optimists, like that's what they call themselves, right? Like those are people that are really going to make all the moonshots, right? Every single person who has ever, you know, gotten successful in terms of, you know, deep tech and moonshots, that's what they have, right? That crazy optimism. But it's also, you know, also being, you know, pessimistic enough, like, all right, like if this problem or sort of like if the solution is not realistic whatsoever, like they pivot, right? They change their idea, they change whatever, right? They pivot. So you sort of have this balance between extreme optimism and extreme pessimism. So it's interesting. But one thing I did want to like mention though, just like in terms of like
Yeah.
pessimism and optimism, I always think there's just like there's basically like sort of like two sort of people in the world, right? You know, you got the pessimist and optimist, and you know, obviously everyone knows that it's something, you know, sort of grand, or it's not some, you know, new theory or whatever. But what gets me is just like a lot of people, they equate pessimism to realism, and I think that's just so wrong, right? It creates a cycle of sort of like learned helplessness. Also, I know we've talked about this before, right? Just like, you know, equating pessimism to realism, it's not, right? It's two different things, right? Now, obviously, you know, there's times where, like, you know, pessimism is warranted, right? When pessimism is warranted, that's realism, right? When something might go wrong, and you know, it's proven, right? You have evidence of doing so. All right, you got to change, right? That's being realistic, all right? But you know, when it's for the better to think something will go wrong, and you know, you got to be, you know, sort of like it's almost like, you know, you got to be actually like one term that I heard, right, when I was doing my research, right, being like passionately dispassionate, right? Like you got to be like, you know, optimistic. Obviously you have to be optimistic enough to, like, you know, make this moonshot, right, do whatever it is, but you have to be, you know, sort of pessimistic enough, right, dispassionate enough to, you know, pivot, right, to change right away, right when you can. And you know, even when you see, you know, this sort of, you know, a quick obstacle or whatever it is, right, in this uphill journey, you know, as opposed to something that's, you know, a definite failure, right? Like, you know, again, optimism, right? People are going to get over those obstacles, but they're going to realize, like, all right, like if you see this thing that is like a fundamental failure, all right, you change, right? You change your course,
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? And you know, they, you know, these optimistic people right there, it's empowering to them, right? It motivates them. Pessimistic people, right? Like it's you know, it's going to turn them away, right? And I know, like, you know, we spoke about this before, right? Like learned helplessness, like that's like the key to everything, right? It's just like it's having this mindset that's just like restricted to growth. And you know, whether it's, you know, intellectual, moral, or physical growth, it's just like, you know, any sense of improvement or progress forward. Like again, those people that, you know, equate sort of, you know, pessimism to realism, and I just think it's just this recipe for disaster, right? It is learned helplessness and so forth.
Yeah.
And just like, you know, changing your perspective is so key. It's just like, you know, if you you know, if you view things in a pessimistic light, then and you're also in the cycle of, you know, all right, you think being negative is normal, it's just gonna, you know, it's gonna spiral into sort of, you know, disaster or whatever. And
It's scary.
it's
It
hard to
really
change
is.
it. It's scary, but like again, the people who actually win in the end are those who are optimistic and sort of, you know, extremely optimistic, but have that little sense of, you know, all right, like have this little sense of realism, right? Not pessimism, but realism. So I don't know, it's interesting, but nonetheless, like
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting, yeah.
There's a great quote that I love. It was actually by Tom Hanks. He goes, "If it were, if let me get it right." So it was a great quote. Yeah, Tom Hanks. He goes, "If it were easy, everyone would do it. It's the hard that makes it
Yeah,
great." And when you talk about pessimism
yeah,
versus realism, that's exactly what it is. A realist says, I'm going to make this moonshot. I'm going to pursue this career goal. You know, I think so many people end up saying, I see this in my own life. You know, there's the idea between being an accountant and doing what you want to do, being a lawyer, being a doctor, and doing what you want to do. And so many people take the pessimistic route and say, there is no chance that I could succeed in doing what I want to do. Right, you know, starting
yeah,
up a company, being an artist, right? There's that idea of, you know, quitting your lawyer job to become an artist, you know, and the idea that the pessimist would say that there is almost no chance that I do it. A realist would say there's a very little chance that I could do it, but I think I could do it. Right,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
just being able to put that in perspective and say everything requires risk. It is really interesting to go and sit back and think about the person who decides not to get started, right? Because that's
mm,
most of the people. Most of the people decide not to follow their dreams. Most of the people choose the accountant over the thing that they really want to pursue and the goal that they really want to do or the company that they really want to start. So
yeah.
I must ask, you know, what is it that gives somebody that courage?
That's tough. That's tough. It's tough, but in my research, like what I realized is just like it's the people who let themselves be courageous, like those are the ones who win, right? It's just like that personal sort of, hindrance. You gotta get over that, right? That sort of, that the mental obstacle, like it's all mental, right? I say in my book, right? Like, think about making moonshots. It all starts with the mental, right? If you don't have that sort of, mindset to some degree, obviously, no one's like perfect or whatever, but just like, if you don't have that sort of those qualities, right? Letting yourself be courageous, right? Letting yourself be bold. It's not going to work out in the end, right? And it's scary, obviously. Like not everyone is, in the right circumstances, right? Not everyone has, the financial stability or well-being, right? Maybe, the familial sort of, have maybe like a stable family or whatever. Everyone has different circumstances. Like I totally get that, but one thing that everyone can have, I think, at least, I'm no expert, but I just think, like, if you could, let yourself be courageous, then you will be, right? It's
Yeah.
so simple, right? It's such a simple perspective shift, but I think like that's key, right? Again, obviously some people can't, right? They have things they got to deal with, right? Mental health, right? Obviously that's important, right? They got to feed their family. Obviously that's way more important than, making a company. Obviously got to worry about that, but it's just like, all right, like if you let yourself be just a little bit more courageous than, than yesterday, like it'll compound, right?
Yeah.
Something good will come of it, and
I was
your
thinking,
risks will sort of, turn into a reward at some point in time. I'm
yeah.
confident in that, right? So
I
I don't
was
know, it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, all right, what is it that will be like allow somebody to take risks? And you just described it so well, and the fact that it's this debate that we have between like our logic and our emotion, right? You
Yeah.
think about somebody who really decides to make a change in their life. Let's say that's something that I guess I'm an expert in, right? Losing weight.
Mhm.
For somebody who says they're going to lose weight, they're not sitting there and they're like, I was sitting in my office and I was trying to calculate the mathematical probability of me dying if I decided to eat this weight. And no, nobody talks about that. What most people talk about is I decided to make a change to
Yeah.
for my kids, or I couldn't take it anymore, or all these answers to really make positive change in your life lie with our emotions. So
Yeah.
when you talk about letting yourself become courageous, you're really saying, I'm going to shift my pessimistic mind, my rational mind that really focuses on the negatives, really focuses on risks, really focuses on what happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? What happens if this awful situation happens that I really am not prepared for? Instead, you let yourself be courageous. You let your emotions take over, and that passion that exists inside of you will really be able to manifest itself and allow you to do the things that your rational mind would never allow you to do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's also like it also gets like it has to be like, said that like there's some things you can control and some things you can't, right? You said you're reading about like Seneca before, right? Like all about stoicism and whatnot, I'm sure.
Yep.
Like obviously there are going to be external factors you just have no control over, right? You can't control other people, you can't control, the environment, you can't control whatever, right? It's, it's sort of like, realizing that, and letting the internal things you can control, right? Again, let the internal like be whatever you want to be, right? Let yourself be courageous, right? Like do everything that is, considered courageous to yourself, right? In whatever context, whatever circumstances you have, like again, whatever risks that you can, take in a healthy manner, just letting yourself do that, like again, internally, right? You can't worry about the external, and you can't let the external affect you, right? But if you could, again, if you can make the external internal, right? Find some way to control it, there you go. Like that's one step into the, in the right direction, right? It's interesting, right? This distinction between internal and external, and what you can control and what you can't. And I don't know. I just feel like, the most successful people, they make whatever is considered to be external internal, right? You know what I mean? Like they they're strategic, right? They're resourceful, whatever it is. Again, they let luck come towards them, and they make the external internal.
Yeah.
I just
So
thought that on the spot. I don't know if that's true, but yeah.
no, I mean it's very true. I was actually reading about it right before we got on this podcast, actually. So I read this book. It's
Okay.
called The Morning Rituals, just morning rituals or daily rituals. And what it talks about is literally just the morning rituals or daily rituals of these amazing people, the successful people. This guy just put together, and it's like one small page each. I just read a page a day of one of my heroes, one of these really important people that have been able to create a daily ritual that has allowed them to succeed. And the one that he talks about was Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison is I'm sure you've heard of her. She's a very popular writer. Sold many novels in the past, like multimillionaire, is one of the few successful authors. And it's funny because if you were to predict that if you were to look at like everyone's situation out of like a million people, you would say that she's probably maybe the least likely to succeed. Worked a 9-to-5 job her whole life, single mother of 2 kids, and was very poor, like struggled, and really had very little time to herself. But at the same time, like you could say those were all the things that were outside of her control. Then at the same time, all she said was, I got 2 hours today. I got 2 hours of writing to do. I could control that. I could do it, right?
Yeah.
And she got it done. You look at someone like J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling, everyone knows J.K. Rowling. She was on Social Security right before she became famous. Yeah. She was literally like poor beyond belief, also a single mother, just absolutely so unlikely to succeed. But at the same time, all she said was, I am going to focus on what's in my control. I am going to write the best book series that I could possibly deliver. And that's all she did, right? So obviously, there are so many things that are outside of our control. But at the same time, it's so beautiful to look at the people who've gone through these insurmountable obstacles. The last person I had on my podcast, he deals with paraplegics, right? Paraplegics, people who suffer from neurochemical disorders. So literally people who don't have access to their arms and legs, people who have amputated their arms and legs. Eric LeGrand is one of the people I had on my podcast, and he's actually one of his physicians. And he goes, there are some people who literally don't have access to their arms and legs, but they are so happy.
Yeah.
How is that possible? And the most amazing part about it is we could look at these people and say they had such little to control. They had so many things that were outside of their control, yet they focused on the little thing that they could control, and that was what made all the difference.
Yeah. What's interesting? I was sort of smiling when you're saying that. To bring back the moonshots, right? Deep tech and everything. There's this one company I really, really love that's literally, fundamentally giving people control of their lives, right? I know 2 of them, actually. I just thought of the second one on the spot, right? First one, right? Control Labs. I probably told you about them, right? Obviously, I'm biased. It's a Lux Capital, portfolio company. Nonetheless, I love it. And I love the founder as well. He's really he has a really interesting life. But nonetheless, right? Like Control Labs, right? What they're doing, they made mind control real, right? Like they literally made it a way where this machine that you put on your wrist, it could capture your intent, right? It sort of captures the fired neurons, the neurons, that sort of carry whatever intent, and it sort of translates that onto whatever robot or computer, whatever it is, right, into the machine, right? So essentially, right, you could control an external object with your hand, right, or with with your mind. So long as you have the intent. Again, like things like that. That's what I mean. That's what I love about moonshot companies, right? They're literally giving people more control over their lives, right? Think about like paralyzed people, right? So again, so long as they have the intent, they could move whatever, right? They could get, have like a an external limb, right? And just like thinking about it, right? Having the intent, and they could move this whatever machine or whatever it is, right?
So you're saying that they could, like, their brain goes to a prosthetic, and the prosthetic literally goes back to their brain, and the brain could actually pretend like it's an actual arm, and they could grab something.
Not necessarily, right? Like, so basically, right? Like, all right, so like, and there's 2 different companies, right? One is Control Labs. Another one I'm thinking of is called Atom Limbs. So Atom Limbs is something similar to what you said, right? Basically, what Control Labs is doing now, right? Like they sort of built the operating system of this whole concept, right? Basically, like, all right, like you have this thing on your wrist, right? This wrist thing, right? It can capture like each individual neuron that is fired from your brain to your hand, let's say, right? All right, so it's on your wrist, right? Let's say it's controlling, whatever intent you're sending to your hand. Like this machine, right? It captures those individual neurons, translates it, and then you could, it sort of, puts it onto whatever machine, right? A computer, an external limb, whatever it is, right? So literally, like, right, like if you're thinking about something, like it'll happen on said machine, and it's just like, all right, like you're literally giving more control to people who have no control, right? Like you're that's like you're giving more control. You're making you're like, it's crazy. Like I'm jumbling my words. It's just like, it's so cool. Like you're literally increasing human happiness, right? Human control over
Yeah.
people's bodies, right? Over their cells. Like that's what I love about the philosophical aspect of deep tech and stuff like that, right? Like literally, reducing human suffering. And in this, the most sci-fi thing you could think of, right? Mind control. Like that's insane. It's crazy, right? And then another company, right? To my point, right? Like it's called Adam Limbs. I met the founder, really cool guy. I met him on Twitter and stuff. And like again, like he has the same thing except it's for limbs, right? So he works with people who amputees and whatever it may be who lost their limbs and stuff. And like there's like the technology works. Like I've seen it work. Like he has videos of it, right? And it's legit. Like they think of something, they try to move their arm, and they move their arm, right? Person, like he has like a lot. He's posted a lot of videos. So you just see like this person who lost his arms, right? He's like moving this bionic arm by mind control. Like it's insane. It's just like crazy to think of it.
It's
And it's just,
connected to his body. Is that what you're saying?
exactly. It's just this concept of again, making the external internal, right? Like literally fundamentally increasing your control over whatever it may be. Technology can do that as well. It's interesting, right? Like sort of philosophy and technology, but nonetheless,
It's so
that's what you
interesting.
said reminded me about it.
No, it does really freak me out, and just the fact that we are, yeah, like I love that you're increasing human happiness. Like that is so amazing to see that that this technology could be used for good. Like I do worry about companies that are using this technology for bad. Like mind control. Obviously, it's a scary thing, right? We worry. I was actually talking to I was talking to my barber yesterday, and just got a nice haircut, and
Yeah,
he
I see.
said that and he said that he worries that one day we're all going to have a chip in our brain. You know,
Mhm.
he worries that one day, we're going to be under some crazy mind control, you know, scheme put up by a government, by a company, by anything. And I do worry. Do you think that these companies or these technologies have the potential to do bad, or at the same time, do you think that this is my point of view. I think that some of these things are inevitable. Like Elon Musk says, AI is inevitable. It's just a matter of whose hands it ends up in.
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. Like again, that's what goes. And first of all, like chips in our brains and whatever it is, like that's not going to come within the next sort of next the near
After our
future.
lifetime.
No, yeah, it's a long it's in a long way. Like actually like widespread adoption into that. Like I don't think
Yeah,
our generation has to worry about that at least.
agreed.
Nonetheless, right? That's what I mean when I say wise companies, right? People who actually understand the consequences, the ninth, 10th order consequences of making this technology, right? Making this breakthrough, commercializing it, right? Making the company making it widely accessible to everyone. Like that's what I mean when I say wise companies, right? People got to realize, like, all right, like again, what happens if a bad actor harnesses this sort of science or technology? Like what's going to happen, right? And they got to
Yeah.
stop that, right? Again, like it's scary, but one thing I say to everyone, like don't bet against like human progress, right? Like human innovation, like don't, like I hate it. Like it's stupid. Like why would someone like bet against human, I don't know. Nonetheless, the people who do progress us, right, sort of science and tech progress and whatever it is, like those are the people who have to be wise. They got to be cognizant of, like, all right, like if someone harnesses this, like they gotta do it safely, right? They gotta protect against that. So it's interesting. Like again, just wise companies, right? Wise founders and so forth.
Hey, I think that is a perfect place to end it. I have to respect your time, of course. So you are releasing a book, and your book is all about that exact idea, trying to create wise companies, wise founders, people who are not only going to be successful in business, but also at the same time, build a company that is good for everybody. So
Yeah.
I must ask you, you have a book that is coming out. I will be posting this episode on the December 6th. Your book will be posted on Amazon on December 7th. And of course, the link will be right there. You need to make a pitch for everybody, young people who are thinking about starting up a company, who are thinking about making a big action in their lives, which is making maybe a moonshot that they've been sitting on for a while. Why should they buy your book, Making Moonshots?
Of course, yeah. So said person should buy my book, Making Moonshots, because basically, all right, look, we lost that innovative edge in the last century. I say in my book, right? Panama Canal, right? Manhattan Project, Apollo missions, Human Genome Project, whatever you want to say. Like we used to be capable of such big things, right? Such like groundbreaking moonshots, right? Deep tech, whatever, right? These projects that fundamentally progressed human ingenuity, right? The sort of science and tech advancement, like science and tech progress, whatever you want to call it, like they're all the same things, but nonetheless, right? Like who literally push humanity forward, right? We used to make all these things, right? All these discoveries, all these breakthroughs, whatever. We lost that, right? Now all of our best talent is going to maximizing ad revenue, and not it's not going to saving lives, right? Or making some whatever breakthrough that we need in whatever industry and in whatever context, right? The people who do those things that we need, those are moonshot founders, right? We need more of those people, and we need them because there's so many problems in the world, and they're not going to be solved with conventional ways, right? They're like we've been hacking at these whatever problems. Again, there's so many of them. We've been hacking at them for decades, right? There's no progress, right? And it just goes to show like the conventional way of thinking, right? The conventional way of doing things, executing, right? Making companies, like it's not going to work, right? We need to get back to that future that we should have been on, right? The future that never was, right? We need to build the future, and the right future, right? People who do that are moonshot founders, right? I'm giving you the toolkit on how to do that.
It's beautiful. It's like you're going to get so much purpose from building a company, like that inner sense of purpose that comes from building a company that not only drives for profit, but drives for good, drives for societal good. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what moonshot companies are all about.
That's what it is. We need more of them.
Hey, I agree. And anyone listening, buy Rahul Rana's Making Moonshots, and you could be one of those people. I think one of the greatest ideas that you put forth in this entire book, in this entire podcast, is that anyone can be a founder. Anybody could do it. You just need to get the guts to go and do it. So first step, listen to this podcast. Second step, buy Rahul Rana's book. Rahul, it was great having you on.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.